Well, let's start with this. Detroit, San Francisco. And I just want to talk about the Lions first. I'll get to the Niners in a bit. Did the Niners win it, or did the Lions lose it? And I got to be honest with you, it kind of felt like the latter. It took a lot to beat Detroit themselves. A reckless head coach, a ball that ricocheted off a defender and became a 51-yard San Francisco catch, a drop pass or three, and a key fumble by a talented rookie. Suddenly, a 24-10 lead melted, and the Lions were playing catch-up on the road, and here comes the Niners pass rush. Detroit is an excellent young football team. San Francisco's an excellent veteran football team. And, brother, did you see it? I like Dan Campbell, a former player. But he often coaches like one, reckless and too emotional. Dan, it's 24-10. You're on the road. Probably should kick a field goal, make it a three-score game. But he didn't. And he has created a tough, cool alpha vibe. But the general needs to be above the infantry, to make stoic, strategic, unemotional decisions. Dan Campbell lives for every play. That's what players do. That's not what leaders should do. And what's concerning with Detroit, they got the alpha and the tough and the aggressive. But the cerebral part of the Lions organization now, O.C. Ben Johnson, on that staff, he's the brainiac. He's leaving. He's taking a head coaching job. And reckless has never hoisted trophies in this sport. And there's a line, I get it, between aggressive and reckless. But doesn't it feel like Dan crosses it regularly? We saw it with Dallas. What are you doing? Again, the general, separate. The bite the kneecap stuff. Listen, man, he's easy to like. It was funny. And sad Detroit finally had a coach, big as a house, cool, a vibe, a culture. There's a lot to like. But winning a beer drinking contest is cool too, in college. And then you get a job, and you have real responsibilities. It's called being a grown-up. Detroit now needs to move into the next phase. Work smarter, not always harder. Be emotional, but never be unhinged, right? Like, mom and dad, it's your license, it's your car. You're going to sit at the big boy table now. And I loved the first phase of Detroit. From awful to alpha to good, a stacked roster, they were here for the moment and earned every inch of it. But it's time now to pivot to what Kansas City does in big games, or what the Niners did in the second half. Efficiency, not losing your mind. There are phases in life. There are stages. There are chapters. This was a cool one. It's a learning lesson, hopefully, you'd think. But Dan Campbell, after, did not apologize for what's perceived to be recklessness.
I told those guys, this may have been our only shot. Do I think that? No. Do I believe that? No. However, I know how hard it is to get here. I'm well aware. And it's going to be twice as hard to get back to this point next year than it was this year. That's the reality. And if we don't have the same hunger and the same work, which is a whole nother thing, once we get the offseason, then we got no shot of getting back here.
Listen, I like Dan. He's never going to be McVay, Shanahan. I don't think he's LaFleur, certainly not Andy Reid. I like parts of him. What you hope as a Lions fan is that you can maintain the alpha and the toughness and the aggressiveness, but ditch the recklessness. Unhinged against Dallas. 24-10 lead. Listen, so much I like about Dan, but you could have made it a three-score game. People say playoffs are different. Well, yeah, they mean more. Mistakes are okay. Getting occasionally overly emotional is okay, but you got to learn from it and not defend it. We'll see next year. Niners in a second. First, the Chiefs. Once again, second, third time, I doubted them. I watched them all year. They sputtered, inconsistent. I doubted them. I will never doubt Patrick Mahomes again. For the first time ever, and though Brady was great, I never really thought this when I was watching. But I saw something yesterday, and I thought, sitting on my couch, I'm watching the greatest football player that's ever played. I didn't see Jim Brown. It's not about points. I'm watching the greatest football player I've ever seen in Patrick Mahomes. It was like Tiger in the red shirt. Final hole, final round at the Masters. It was MJ when challenged, backed into a corner at Game 6. It's like a level above great. I think it's called historic. And again, I don't care about the trophies. Derek Jeter was always good, a 300 hitter. But what if he hit 380 in the World Series consistently? I've never seen a player increase his efficiency, not just productivity, his efficiency and judgment by like 30, 40% in the playoffs, on the road, against the best teams, against the best defense in the league. He throws no interceptions in the playoffs. Almost unthinkable. Brady had pick sixes in him, Super Bowls. Efficiency, up. Productivity, depends on the defense. But what you're watching just doesn't make sense. People aren't at their best on the road as a dog, facing relentless pressure, with an offensive line missing their best linemen and tackles this year who were spotty. It's not supposed to look like that. And the more you ask of Mahomes, very MJ, very Tiger, the more you ask of him, the more he rises to the occasion. I'm telling you, I'd never watched a football game and thought, I'd thought that's the best receiver I've ever seen. Oh, that's the best linebacker I've ever seen. No, I thought that's the best player I've ever seen. I mean, sometimes I've seen this now. Miami, Buffalo, Baltimore. Weather, non-factor. He was great, minus 27. Buffalo, defense, pressure, no factor, yesterday. What was that? Then you add the fact that it's Andy Reid, Mahomes, Kelsey, Steve Spagnuolo, and Chris Jones. It's starting to feel a lot like those New England dynasties, where had Josh McDaniels failed as a head coach, so you knew he was going to be loyal as an assistant. Brady, Belichick, Dante Scarnecchia. You had this layered institutional knowledge. You know, all these good teams in the league. The Niners, a great example. They're constantly losing assistants and replacing assistants. Spags is going nowhere. Andy Reid's going nowhere. Mahomes is going nowhere. The front office is going nowhere. You have so much confidence, big game experience, institutional knowledge in that building. In these big games, people play better. Gronk and Edelman, Brady, better. I'm watching Travis Kelce. It's one of his greatest games ever. Mahomes' efficiency, incredible. That was a masterclass from a dynasty with a lot more juice and a lot more fun than most of the New England ones. And I will never, ever doubt Kansas City again, and specifically Mahomes. All year long, drops, frustration, unrefined, sputtering, 17 points a game, trailing, bad first halves, bad on script, bad off script, not much after half. And the last 3 weeks, minus 27. Buffalo, in Baltimore. Flawless? Here's Patrick after.
You never know how many you're going to get to, if you're going to get to any. And so it truly is special. Just to do it with these guys after what we've been through all season long, the guys coming together, it really is special. But I told them, the job's not done. Our job now is to prepare ourselves to play a good football team in the Super Bowl and try to get that ring.
So the best roster many perceive the Niners will take on the best quarterback and the coach in Kansas City. We've seen it before, and if you recall, the Niners led going into the fourth, and then Garoppolo missed on what could have been the ceiling of the victory. Now it's another quarterback who's not viewed as elite, Brock Purdy, against a Kansas City team that remains the best coached and the best quarterback on the planet. Couple of weeks rest and prep. 2 offensive coaches, what a shock, are left, and probably the 2 best offensive coaches in an offensive sport are left, and I can't wait. I'll get to the Niners after the break. I will say this, is that, all season long, J-Mac, all season long, we kind of have a vibe on who's good, and then teams, like Jacksonville sort of plummets, and Dallas gets exposed, but as I was watching all these teams, especially San Francisco and Detroit, And I felt going into the game, Detroit totally belonged. They were a younger version of the Niners. They had the left tackle, the weapon, the edge rusher. San Francisco doesn't have a ton of years left with this group. Detroit's got several years left. But just that moxie by the veteran San Francisco Niners, they never panicked. And let's be honest, there were moments in that game, you're like, can Brock Purdy come back from 3 to 4 touchdowns? You were thinking that.
Yeah.
So it's here we are. I'm glad we're here, and I'll never doubt Kansas City again. I've said all year about Brock Purdy. We have to contextualize it. It's a great place to land as a quarterback. Kyle Shanahan, the best left tackle in forever, the best running back in football, the second best tight end, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. It's a great place to land. You could land in Carolina, or you could land with a terrible coach. Brock Purdy landed in the perfect spot. But it should be noted, so did Trey Lance, and he couldn't get it done. So Brock Purdy deserves credit. There's 2 things that jumped out to me. First of all, that first half looked like the game was over. San Francisco never panicked down 24-10. They just kept feeding Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle. They never lost their identity, Baltimore. They had a really flat first half. Not going to be able to do that against Kansas City, but they overcame it. And number 2 is Kyle Shanahan's always wanted his quarterback to move a little. It's why they drafted Trey Lance. It's why he got frustrated with Jimmy Garoppolo. And then they found Brock Purdy, who could move and was accurate. And that mobility, that movement, plus Shanahan's schemes, once it gets rolling downhill, is tough to stop. Brock Purdy lacks a power arm. He's not real big. God, we saw drizzly weather give him fits a week ago. But that mobility was a factor. Shanahan's schemes, always a factor. Those weapons, insane, all-time good. And Brock Purdy's ability to come from behind is no small feat. Now, 5 of his 8 playoff quarters, be honest, he's been outplayed by Goff and Jordan Love badly. But he has shown an ability to shake off a bad half or a bad pass or a bad drive. He doesn't sulk and he doesn't melt, and that's a real thing. Now, will the Super Bowl end up looking like the last San Francisco-Kansas City Super Bowl, where the great talent of San Francisco, a quarterback that's not elite, they lead, they control it, and then Mahomes makes it all pretty damn irrelevant and takes over the fourth quarter? I don't know. But make no mistake, the Niners earned this, and Brock Purdy was a huge part of it. That last San Francisco team was not as good as this Niner team offensively. That Niner team didn't have Christian McCaffrey or Trent Williams or Brandon Ayuk. And yes, I'll say it, they didn't have Brock Purdy. His mobility, his ability to shake off bad halves, he never melted, he never panicked. I watched the Lions panic. I watched Lamar Jackson panic. I watched Baltimore panic. Brock Purdy never did. Not once. Had a bad throw, never rattled, never played frenetic football. It's not just arm. It's not just strength. It's not being the fastest or the most anything. So much of this position is the ability to forget the last series. Don't melt. Don't get down on yourself. Play to your strengths. And make no mistake, not only did San Francisco outplay the Lions, who melted, Brock Purdy was a huge part of this win. Here's the coach after.
I thought it was the difference between winning and losing. He made some big plays with his legs, getting out of the pocket, moving the chains in some first downs, getting some explosives. He competed his ass off today, and it wasn't easy for any of us, but he kept grinding and was unbelievable there in the second half.
That is a great word. To make the NFL and make a Super Bowl as the final guy drafted is a grind. You walk into camp, you're kind of a running joke, right? They have like an award, a name, a term for the last guy drafted. And reportedly, it just didn't take that long to see he was a grown-up, he was a grinder, he gained his teammates' respect. There's a lot of things he's not, but something that he is a gamer. And that, in this system, this gritty team, This physical club full of smart, savvy, tough veterans is a real thing, and I'm happy for him.